perceive this as nothingness, emptiness, just blank. It's not that we're unconscious when we're asleep. It's just that our consciousness is turned completely inward and is not focused on anything in particular. We're in Brahman, and in Brahman there's no difference in quality between the foreground and the background. So like the black cat in the black room, there's nothing to see, nothing to experience. Because we're in an ocean of energy that is exactly the same quality as ourself. You see? Does that answer your question? No? No response?
I have to wait to remember this.
Oh, right. There's a delay. Well, anyway, what's the next question?
Question from Ronald Singh. Ronald Singh. I love reading the Gita. It reveals something new each time I read it. Is that normal? I'm also reading Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. It complements the Gita.
If it doesn't reveal something new each time, then you're not reading it properly. The Gita is like an ocean. It's inexhaustible. And every time you read it, you go deeper into that ocean and you see something you never saw before. So even Srila Prabhupada was saying, and Srila Prabhupada was in his 70s or 80s when he was preaching. And he was saying that even at his old age, every time he reads the Bhagavad-gītā, he gets some new insight. And here's someone who probably has the whole Gita memorized and can recite it from memory. The way Prabhupada used to preach about Bhagavad-gītā is just amazing, just unprecedented. He could quote shloka after shloka after shloka after shloka, and you just can't imagine how he could remember so many shlokas. But he was always enlivened by the Gita so much, and here's someone who's been reading the Gita his whole long life, and he's still excited about it. He's still enthusiastic about it, because it's such an unexhaustible mine of transcendental wisdom. So, that means you're reading Bhagavad-gītā properly. And Bhagavad-gītā leaves off at a certain point. And that point is, Sarva dharman parityaja mam ekam sharanam vraja. Just give up all different kinds of religion and just surrender to me, Krishna says. So if you do that, then the next step is Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Bhagavad-gītā is spoken on a battlefield. And there's a reason for that. The battle is, are we going to surrender to Krishna or to Maya? Are we going to have faith or are we going to rebel? Are we going to serve Krishna or are we going to serve our mind and senses? It's a battle. Both sides are trying their best to get victory. But of course, inevitably, the Supreme Lord wins. And you may make so many mistakes, but eventually you come to the right side and surrender to Krishna. Then what? That's described in Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam then gives the standard philosophy, the stories of so many devotees who were successful in their spiritual life. And it describes how we can be successful in our spiritual life as well. So Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam is the next step after Bhagavad-gītā. It's spoken by a pure devotee, Shukadeva Goswami. And it's heard by pure devotee, Maharaj Parikshit, and the assembled sages at Naimisharanya. So we should, as soon as we understand Bhagavad-gītā and surrender to Krishna, the next step is to read Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. And Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, there's enough in there for a lifetime of study. If we really understand Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam and apply it to our lives, Don't just read it like a story or a novel. Every shloka has a lesson that we can actually apply in our life and will make our lives better. So please read Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam like that, and then you'll get so much benefit. Is there more questions?
Yeah.
Wow, this is great. See, when you ask questions, I don't have to make stuff up.
Question from Jan again. Is there any problem reading post-Prabhupada edition of Bhagavatam?
Don't recommend it. Actually, all the BBT books have editorial mistakes. The problem is that Srila Prabhupada's disciples were very neophyte when they were editing these books. And they made so many errors. We just found an error last night in Nectar of Devotion, for example. And that's just the one that's obvious because it was, a really severe error. But the subtle errors are very difficult to find, especially the things that are omitted. I think you heard us maybe once or twice talk about how the preface to Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam was edited to remove the statement that Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam is an ontological education. So, that's a very important statement. And without that understanding, you can't really grasp the meaning of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam properly. So who knows what other things were omitted. I talked to the editor and that made that change, and he said, well, I just thought nobody would understand it. That's such a stupid idea. Anyway, just because he didn't understand it, he thought that nobody else could understand it. But actually that was the key to understanding Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. So there are many, many mistakes in Srila Prabhupada's books, but at this point in time, it's impossible to correct them because Srila Prabhupada is no longer here on this planet. So they still go on changing the books more and more. And in Bhagavad-gītā, there are literally thousands of changes since Prabhupada's original. And I don't think they've gotten around to editing the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam too much, because it's too big for one thing. But I do know that they've made more changes in Caitanya-caritāmṛta, in Nectar of Devotion, in Krishna book, Sri Ishopanishad. All those books have been changed since Srila Prabhupada left. And they were being changed even while Srila Prabhupada was present. And Srila Prabhupada found some of these changes and he demanded that they publish the book again in the original way. And of course his disciples didn't do it. What can I say about my God brothers, it's like they just didn't get it. It's just too bad. But what can we do? They don't want any advice or help. So I guess they're just going to go on in their way and we're going to go on in our way. Our way is to try to overcome the deficiencies of the editors and producers of Prabhupada's books by going back to the original Sanskrit, the original teachings, trying to understand things in an analytical way, and also by trying to verify things in our own consciousness. If you read Prabhupada's books and you actually perform the experiments on your own consciousness that are described in the shlokas, then you will reach your own understanding, you will reach your own realization. And then you have no need to depend on any outside authority. You'll have your own experience to go on. And this is what we try to teach our students. You should be trying to become self-realized. Don't depend on other people to tell you what's going on. You yourself should become self-realized, and then you'll know, and you won't need anything outside of yourself. Consciousness itself will teach you. Krishna himself will teach you.
Question from Devesh. Babaji, we would like to listen the ripe fruit of Vedas, Bhagavatam, from your mouth someday. Maybe on evening darshans after we finish Nectar of Devotion?
Oh, that would be a nice project, huh? Then I'd have to live for another 100 years to get through it. Okay.
I had a question.
Uh-huh.
You had mentioned that we are conscious and we are consciousness. And I was a little confused because you mentioned that consciousness is an attribute of the soul. So